The desert sun beat down mercilessly on Marcus Thompson as he stumbled through the rocky terrain of New Mexico. His water bottle had been empty for hours, and his lips were cracked and bleeding. The archaeology expedition that had brought him to this remote canyon had gone terribly wrong when a flash flood separated him from his team 3 days ago. Marcus was a 32-year-old professor from Boston University, specializing in Native American cultures. He had spent years studying the Apache tribes, but all his book knowledge seemed useless now as he faced the harsh reality of survival in their ancestral lands. His khaki clothes were torn, his face sunburned, and his hands cut from climbing over sharp rocks. As he climbed over another boulder, Marcus saw something that made his heart race. In the distance, 3 figures moved gracefully across the desert landscape. Even from far away, he could tell they were Native American women by their traditional clothing and the way they moved with the land instead of against it. They wore long skirts and colorful tops, their black hair braided with what looked like feathers and beads. Marcus tried to call out, but his voice was just a hoarse whisper. He waved his arms frantically, hoping they would notice him. The women seemed to glide across the desert floor, completely at home in this harsh environment that was slowly killing him. The eldest of the 3 women, who appeared to be in her 50s, suddenly stopped and turned in his direction. She had striking features with high cheekbones and intelligent dark eyes that seemed to see everything. She wore a necklace of turquoise stones and silver that caught the sunlight. The 2 younger women, who looked to be sisters in their 20s, also turned to look at him. Marcus stumbled forward, his legs weak from dehydration and exhaustion. The women watched him approach but didn't move toward him. There was something cautious in their stance, as if they were deciding whether he was friend or threat. When Marcus was about 50 feet away, he collapsed to his knees. His vision was blurring, and he could feel himself losing consciousness. The last thing he saw before everything went black was the eldest woman making a quick gesture to the other 2, and then, all 3 of them hurrying toward him. Marcus woke up to the feeling of cool water on his lips. His eyes fluttered open to see the youngest of the 3 women holding a clay vessel to his mouth. She had gentle features and kind eyes, and there was something almost sacred about the way she helped him drink. The water was the most delicious thing he had ever tasted. He was lying in the shade of a large rock formation, and he could see that the women had created a small shelter using branches and what looked like animal hides. The eldest woman sat nearby, grinding something in a stone bowl, while the 3rd woman, who seemed to be the middle sister, was tending to a small fire. Marcus tried to sit up, but the youngest woman gently pushed him back down. She spoke softly in what he recognized as Apache, though he couldn't understand the words. Her voice was like music, and there was genuine concern in her tone. The eldest woman looked up from her grinding and studied Marcus with sharp eyes. She spoke to him in accented but clear English. "You are far from your people, white man. What brings you to our sacred lands?" Marcus tried to speak, but his voice was still weak. The youngest woman offered him more water, and he drank gratefully before attempting to answer. "I'm an archaeologist. I was with a team studying the ancient settlements in this area. We got separated during a flash flood 3 days ago." The woman's expression didn't change. "Archaeologist," she repeated, as if testing the word. "You dig up the bones of our ancestors and put them in your museums?" Marcus shook his head weakly. "No, not like that. I study cultures to understand and preserve them. I've written about the Apache people with great respect. I believe your history should be told by your own voices, not just by outsiders like me." The middle sister looked up from the fire and spoke rapidly in Apache to the elder woman. Marcus caught a few words that he recognized from his studies, but the conversation was too fast for him to follow. The eldest woman studied him for a long moment. "My name is Elena Crowfeather. These are my granddaughters, Maria and Sophia. We saved your life, but that does not mean you are welcome here. These are sacred grounds, and your people have taken too much already." Marcus struggled to sit up again, and this time Maria, the youngest, helped him. "I understand your distrust," he said. "But I'm not here to take anything. I came to learn, to document the truth about what happened here so that future generations would know the real history, not the lies that have been told." Sophia, the middle sister, spoke for the first time. Her English was also good, though not as polished as her grandmother's. Many white people have said such things before. They promise respect and, then, they steal our sacred objects and sell them to collectors. Marcus reached slowly into his backpack, moving carefully so they wouldn't think he was reaching for a weapon. He pulled out a leather journal and a folder of photographs. "Look," he said, opening the folder. "These are pictures from my previous work. I helped return stolen artifacts to the Hopi tribe in Arizona. I worked with the Cherokee Nation in Oklahoma to document oral histories that were being lost. I don't take things away, I try to give things back." Elena took the photographs and examined them carefully. Her granddaughters looked over her shoulder, and Marcus could see their expressions softening slightly as they saw pictures of him working alongside other Native American people, not just studying them from a distance. Maria pointed to one photograph showing Marcus sitting in a circle with elderly Cherokee storytellers. "You listen to the old stories?" Marcus nodded. "The stories are the most important part. They carry the real truth, the wisdom that can't be found in any artifact or ancient building. That's what I really came here to find, not things to dig up, but stories to preserve." Elena handed the photographs back to him. "You speak well, Marcus Thompson. But words are easy. It is actions that show the truth of a man's heart." She glanced at the position of the sun in the sky. "You are still weak. Rest now. Tomorrow we will decide what to do with you." As the day faded into evening, the three women prepared a simple meal of corn cakes, dried meat, and some kind of herbal tea. They shared their food with Marcus without hesitation, though he could tell that Elena was still watching him carefully. Sophia had been gathering wood for the fire, and Marcus noticed that she moved with a slight limp. When she sat down, he could see that her right foot was bandaged with strips of cloth. "Are you injured?" he asked with genuine concern. Sophia looked at her grandmother before answering. "A scorpion sting, 3 days ago. The same day the great storm came through these canyons." Marcus realized that the flash flood that had separated him from his team had also caused problems for these women. "Is it healing properly?" "Scorpion stings can be dangerous if they get infected." Elena's eyes narrowed. "You know about such things?" Marcus nodded. "Part of my work involves basic medical training. In remote areas, you have to know how to treat injuries and illnesses." "May I look at it?" After a long pause, Elena nodded to Sophia, who reluctantly extended her foot. Marcus examined the bandage carefully, noting the redness and swelling around the wound. "It's showing signs of infection. Do you have any antibiotics?" Maria laughed bitterly. "We are too far from the clinic in town, and we have no money for such medicines anyway." Marcus reached into his backpack again and pulled out a small first aid kit. "I have some antibiotic cream and proper bandages. It's not much, but it should help." He cleaned Sophia's wound carefully and applied the medication before rewrapping it with a clean bandage. Sophia winced during the process but didn't complain. When he was finished, she looked at him with surprise. "Why do you help me? You don't know us." Marcus packed away his medical supplies. "Because you saved my life. And because it's the right thing to do." Elena was quiet for a long time after that, staring into the fire as night fell completely. The desert around them was alive with the sounds of nocturnal animals, and the stars above were brighter than any Marcus had ever seen in the city. Finally, Elena spoke. "You say you want to learn our stories. Do you know why we are here, in this particular place?" Marcus shook his head. "I know this area has archaeological significance, but I don't know the specific cultural meaning." Elena gestured toward the rock formations around them. "This is where my great-grandmother received her vision. She was about Maria's age when the soldiers came to force our people onto the reservation. She hid in these rocks for 7 days, fasting and praying for guidance." Maria picked up the story, her voice soft in the darkness. "The spirits told her that one day, people would come who would want to understand our ways instead of destroy them. But they also warned that others would come who would pretend to understand while still trying to steal from us." Sophia added, "Great-grandmother painted symbols on the rocks to mark this place. They are still here, hidden where only our family knows to look. The markings are a protection, but they are also a test. Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cooling desert air. What kind of test? Elena stood and walked to one of the large boulders. She placed her hand on what looked like a natural shadow, but, as Marcus watched, he realized it was actually a painted marking that blended perfectly with the rock's natural patterns. The markings show 3 paths, Elena explained. One leads to wisdom and understanding. One leads to destruction and loss. And one leads to something in between, neither great good nor great evil, but a chance to choose again. She returned to the fire and looked directly at Marcus. Tomorrow, you will face a choice. Your people will come looking for you. We saw their helicopters searching the canyons earlier today. You can go with them and forget what you have seen here. Or you can stay and learn what we have to teach, but only if you prove that your intentions are truly pure. Marcus felt his heart racing. How would I prove that? Elena smiled, but there was no warmth in it. The same way my great-grandmother proved her commitment to our people. You would have to give up something that matters to you. Something that shows you value our knowledge more than your own comfort or success. The fire crackled between them as Marcus considered her words. He thought about his career, his comfortable life in Boston, his reputation in the academic world. Everything he had worked for was built on his studies of cultures like this one, but he had always been an outsider looking in. Maria spoke quietly. Grandmother, perhaps we should not ask so much of him. He is not one of our people. Elena shook her head. The spirits do not care about blood or skin color. They care about the heart and the spirit. If this man truly seeks wisdom, then he must be willing to sacrifice for it, just as our ancestors did. Sophia shifted uncomfortably, wincing as she moved her injured foot. And if he chooses to leave with his people? Elena's expression grew serious. Then, we will never speak of this meeting, and the sacred markings will remain hidden. But, if he stays and proves false, if he tries to exploit what we show him. She didn't finish the sentence, but her meaning was clear. Marcus stared into the fire, feeling the weight of the decision ahead of him. He had come to this desert looking for archaeological evidence, but he was being offered something much more valuable and much more dangerous, a chance to truly understand a culture from the inside, but only at great personal cost. The 3 women settled down for sleep, but Marcus lay awake for hours, staring at the stars and thinking about the choice he would have to make. He could hear helicopters in the distance, probably search teams looking for him and the other members of his expedition. As dawn approached, Marcus made his decision. Whatever the cost, he could not pass up this opportunity to learn authentic Apache wisdom from keepers of the old traditions. His academic career seemed small and insignificant compared to the chance to preserve knowledge that might otherwise be lost forever. He just hoped he would be strong enough to pay whatever price Elena would demand. The morning sun painted the desert rocks in shades of gold and red as Marcus woke to the sound of helicopters growing closer. Elena was already awake, sitting in meditation position facing the rising sun. Her granddaughters were preparing a simple breakfast of corn mush and herbal tea. Marcus sat up, his body still aching from his ordeal in the desert, but feeling much stronger than the day before. The sound of the helicopters was definitely getting louder, and he could see Elena's expression growing tense. They will be here within the hour, Elena said without turning around. You must make your choice now, Marcus Thompson. Will you go back to your safe world, or will you stay and learn the deeper truths? Before Marcus could answer, Sophia limped over to him. Her foot was already looking better thanks to the antibiotic treatment, but she still moved carefully. If you choose to stay, you should know what you are giving up. Elena will not ask you to abandon your life forever, but the price will be high. Maria knelt beside Marcus and offered him the bowl of corn mush. Grandmother has been chosen by the spirits to be a keeper of our most sacred knowledge. She can teach you things that no book or university has ever recorded. But such knowledge comes with great responsibility. Marcus accepted the food gratefully. What kind of responsibility? Elena finally turned to face him. In the morning light, he could see that she wore intricate markings on her face, not paint, but what looked like permanent tattoos and patterns that seemed to shift and change as the light moved across them. "If I share our sacred knowledge with you," Elena said, "you become bound to protect it. You cannot write about it in your academic papers or speak of it at your conferences. It becomes part of your soul, and you become part of our people, whether you have Apache blood or not." The helicopters were very close now, and Marcus could see one of them approaching their canyon. His heart pounded as he realized this was truly his last chance to make a decision. "There's something else," Sophia added quietly. "The knowledge Elena carries is dangerous. There are people who would kill for it, not just treasure hunters, but government agents, foreign spies, anyone who wants to control the power that comes from understanding the old ways." Marcus stared at the approaching helicopter, then back at Elena's tattooed face. "What kind of power are you talking about?" Elena stood and walked to the large boulder where she had shown him the hidden marking the night before. She placed both hands on the rock and closed her eyes. As Marcus watched in amazement, the stone began to glow with a soft, blue light. "Our ancestors knew how to work with the Earth's energy," Elena explained, her voice strangely echoing despite the open desert around them. "They could find water in the driest places, predict weather patterns months in advance, and heal injuries that would kill ordinary people. This knowledge was hidden when the soldiers came, passed down only to chosen keepers like myself." The helicopter was directly overhead now, and Marcus could see his expedition leader, Dr. James Morrison, leaning out of the aircraft with binoculars. In a few minutes, they would spot the camp and land to rescue him. Marcus looked at Maria and Sophia, both watching him with intense expressions. Then, he looked at Elena, whose hands still glowed against the rock. Everything rational in his mind told him to wave to the helicopter and return to his normal life. But something deeper, something he had never felt before, pulled him toward the mystery these women represented. He made his choice. Instead of signaling to the helicopter, Marcus grabbed a handful of dust and threw it over the fire, creating a cloud of smoke that would hide their camp from aerial view. Then, he grabbed Elena's pack and helped Maria dismantle their shelter with practice speed. The helicopters circled overhead for several more minutes, but the pilot couldn't see through the dust cloud and smoke. Eventually, it moved on to search other areas of the canyon. Elena removed her hands from the rock, and the glow faded immediately. She turned to Marcus with surprise and what might have been approval in her eyes. "You have chosen," she said simply. "But do not think this was the real test. That comes now." Sophia and Maria had already begun hiking toward a narrow trail that led deeper into the canyon system. Elena shouldered her pack and gestured for Marcus to follow. "Where are we going?" Marcus asked. "To the place where my great-grandmother received her vision. To the place where you will either gain the knowledge you seek or lose yourself trying." They walked for hours through increasingly difficult terrain. The trail seemed to disappear completely at times, but Elena led them with absolute confidence through passages between rocks that Marcus would never have noticed on his own. As they climbed higher into the canyon walls, Marcus began to see more of the hidden markings Sophia had mentioned. They were everywhere once you knew how to look for them, symbols carved or painted so skillfully that they appeared to be natural features of the rock unless viewed from exactly the right angle. "How old are these markings?" Marcus asked during a rest break. Maria, who was walking directly behind him, answered. "Some are from my great-grandmother's time, about 150 years ago. Others are much older. Our people have been marking this path for over 1,000 years." Sophia, despite her injured foot, was keeping pace better than Marcus had expected. Each generation of keepers adds new markings and maintains the old ones. "It's like a library written in stone." Elena called back from ahead of them. "The markings are not just decorations or historical records. They are a map and a protection system. Without understanding their meaning, no outsider could ever find the sacred chamber, even if they walked directly past it." The trail led them to what looked like a dead end, a sheer cliff face with no obvious way forward. But Elena approached a section of rock that looked identical to every other part of the wall and placed her hand on a marking that Marcus could barely see. The rock moved. Not like a mechanical door, but like the stone itself was alive and responding to Elena's touch. A passage opened that had been completely invisible moments before. "How is that possible?" Marcus whispered. Elena smiled. This is why your science cannot fully understand our ways. Your people see only the physical world. We see the connections between all things, the life force that flows through stone and flesh alike. The passage led into a system of caves that definitely weren't natural. The walls were carved with intricate patterns, and Marcus realized that they were walking through an enormous piece of artwork that told the entire history of the Apache people. As they moved deeper into the cave system, Marcus began to feel strange. There was an energy in the air that made his skin tingle and his mind feel unusually clear. Colors seemed brighter, sounds seemed sharper, and he found himself understanding things without being told. Do you feel it? Maria asked, noticing his expression. Marcus nodded. What is this place? Sophia answered. It's what your people might call a place of power. The Earth's energy flows strongly here, concentrated by the rock formations and focused by the markings our ancestors created. They emerged into a vast chamber that took Marcus's breath away. The ceiling was at least 50 feet high, covered with paintings that seemed to move in the flickering light of Elena's torch. But what captured Marcus's attention most was the floor of the chamber. It was covered with intricate patterns made from stones, shells, and what looked like precious metals. The design was so complex that Marcus couldn't take it all in at once, but he could see that it formed a kind of map, not of any place on Earth, but of something much more abstract. Elena walked to the center of the pattern and set down her pack. This is the vision chamber. Here, my great-grandmother learned the 3 paths that would be available to future generations of our people. Here, you will learn if you are truly meant to carry our knowledge. Maria and Sophia began unpacking supplies that Marcus hadn't realized they were carrying. They produced water vessels, bundles of herbs, and what looked like ceremonial clothing. Elena turned to Marcus, her expression completely serious. The test you are about to undergo has been used by our people for generations to determine who can be trusted with sacred knowledge. It will show us your true intentions, but it will also change you permanently. If you pass, you will never be the same person you were before. If you fail. She didn't finish the sentence. Marcus felt fear creeping up his spine. What happens if I fail? Sophia looked up from her preparations. Some people lose their minds completely. Others forget everything that brought them here and wander out into the desert to die. A few simply disappear, their bodies are never found. Maria added more gently, but some find exactly what they were looking for. Grandmother has guided 7 people through this test in her lifetime. 4 of them passed and became true allies of our people. They now work to protect native rights and preserve our culture in ways we could never do alone. Elena began changing into elaborate ceremonial robes that were covered with the same shifting patterns Marcus had seen on her face. The test involves drinking a preparation made from sacred plants and allowing the spirits to judge your heart directly. You will experience visions that reveal your deepest motivations. You cannot lie or pretend during this experience, the spirits see everything. Marcus watched the 3 women transform the chamber into a ceremonial space. They lit bundles of sage and other herbs, creating smoke that swirled in patterns that seemed almost alive. They arranged the stones on the floor in new configurations, creating what looked like a nest in the center of the ancient design. I need you to understand something important, Elena said as she worked. This is not just about whether we can trust you. This is about whether you can handle the responsibility of the knowledge I carry. What I know about the connection between consciousness and the physical world could revolutionize your science, but it could also be used to cause terrible harm in the wrong hands. Sophia limped over to Marcus carrying a clay bowl filled with a dark liquid. The vision drink is made from plants that grow only in certain sacred places. It opens the mind to see connections that are normally hidden from ordinary perception. Marcus looked at the bowl, then at the 3 women who had risked their lives to save him. If I do this, if I pass your test, what exactly am I committing to? Elena finished her preparations and stood before him in her full ceremonial regalia. In the strange light of the chamber, she looked less like a human being and more like a force of nature. You would become a bridge between our world and yours, she said. You would help protect sacred sites from those who would exploit them. You would work to ensure that our knowledge is preserved and passed on to future generations, both native and non-native. And you would accept that some things are more important than personal success or recognition. Maria stepped forward. You would also become part of our family. Not legally, but spiritually. What affects us would affect you. Our enemies would become your enemies. Our responsibilities would become your responsibilities. The weight of what they were asking hit Marcus fully for the first time. This wasn't just about learning some interesting cultural information for his research. They were asking him to fundamentally change his life's direction and accept risks that could get him killed. But, as he looked around the ancient chamber, feeling the energy that pulsed through the stone patterns beneath his feet, Marcus knew he couldn't turn back. He had spent his entire career studying cultures from the outside, always feeling like he was missing something essential. Now he was being offered a chance to truly understand, to become part of something larger than himself. I accept, he said quietly. Elena nodded and gestured for him to sit in the center of the stone pattern. Sophia handed him the bowl of vision drink, while Maria began chanting in Apache, her voice creating harmonies with the strange acoustics of the chamber. Marcus looked at the dark liquid in the bowl. It smelled earthy and bitter, with undertones that reminded him of things he couldn't quite identify. He knew that once he drank this, there would be no going back. His old life would effectively be over, regardless of whether he passed the test or not. He brought the bowl to his lips and drank the entire contents in one swallow. The effect was not immediate, but, when it came, it hit him like a physical blow. The chamber around him began to shift and change, the painted ceiling coming alive with moving figures. The stone patterns beneath him started to glow with the same blue light he had seen Elena create earlier. But, most dramatic of all was the change in his perception of the three women. As the vision drink took full effect, Marcus could see them as they truly were, not just individuals, but connected to a vast network of energy that stretched back through generations of their ancestors and forward into possible futures. Elena was no longer just an elderly Apache woman. She was a node of power, a living library of knowledge that had been accumulating for centuries. Maria and Sophia weren't just her granddaughters, they were the next links in a chain of guardianship that went back to the beginning of human consciousness. And Marcus realized that the test he was about to undergo would determine not just whether he could be trusted, but whether he was strong enough to become part of that chain himself. The visions began in earnest, pulling Marcus into a swirling kaleidoscope of images, memories, and possibilities that would determine his fate and the fate of the ancient knowledge Elena protected. The visions came in waves, each one more intense than the last. Marcus found himself experiencing memories that weren't his own, living through moments from the lives of Elena's ancestors as if he had been there himself. He saw through the eyes of Elena's great-grandmother as a young woman, hiding in these same caves while soldiers burned her village below. He felt her terror and desperation, but also her fierce determination to preserve the knowledge that had been passed down to her. The sacred markings weren't just symbols, they were a complete system for understanding how consciousness could interact with the physical world. In the vision, Marcus watched as the young woman spent 7 days without food or water, falling deeper and deeper into a trance state that allowed her to see beyond the normal boundaries of time and space. She saw 3 possible futures for her people, one where they disappeared completely, forgotten by history, one where they became curiosities in museums, their culture turned into entertainment for tourists, and one where they found a way to preserve their essential knowledge while adapting to a changing world. The vision shifted, and Marcus was experiencing his own childhood memories, but seeing them through the lens of the Apache worldview. His early fascination with Native American cultures wasn't just academic curiosity, it was a deep recognition of knowledge systems that his own culture had lost. Every book he had read, every artifact he had studied, had been leading him toward this moment. But the spirits weren't just showing him positive memories. Marcus found himself reliving every moment of selfishness, every time he had prioritized his career over genuine understanding, every instance where he had treated living cultures as subjects for study rather than as people with their own agency and wisdom. He saw himself as others saw him, a well-meaning but ultimately privileged outsider who collected information about oppressed peoples to advance his own position in the academic world. The truth was painful, but the visions forced him to confront every aspect of his motivations without the ability to lie to himself. Then, the visions became more abstract. Marcus found himself in a vast library that seemed to exist outside of normal space and time. The books contained all the knowledge that had been lost when indigenous cultures were destroyed around the world. Millions of years of accumulated wisdom about sustainable living, natural healing, spiritual practices, and the deep connections between all forms of life. Elena appeared beside him in the Vision Library, but she looked as she must have decades ago, young and strong and radiating power. "This is what you really came here to find," she said, gesturing to the endless rows of books. "Not artifacts to display in museums, but living knowledge that could help heal the damage your civilization has done to the earth." Marcus tried to speak, but found that in this place, communication happened through direct transfer of thoughts and emotions. "How can I possibly learn all of this? How can any one person carry so much knowledge?" Elena smiled. "You cannot learn it all. No one can. But you can learn enough to serve as a bridge, to help translate ancient wisdom into forms that modern people can understand and use. The question is whether you are willing to dedicate your life to that purpose." The scene around them changed, and Marcus saw possible futures stretching out like branches of a tree. In some timelines, he returned to his old life and eventually forgot about his experience with Elena and her granddaughters. In others, he tried to exploit what he had learned, writing sensational books about secret Apache magic that violated the trust that had been placed in him. But there were other possibilities too. Marcus saw himself working with environmental scientists to develop sustainable technologies based on indigenous knowledge. He saw himself helping to establish legal protections for sacred sites. He saw himself teaching a new generation of students to approach indigenous cultures with genuine respect and humility. The most powerful vision showed him working directly with native communities, not as an outside expert, but as an adopted member of an extended family that included people from dozens of different tribes. In these timelines, Marcus became a translator between worlds, helping ancient knowledge find expression in modern forms without losing its essential power. But the visions also showed him the dangers. There were people who would kill to obtain the knowledge Elena protected. Government agencies that wanted to weaponize indigenous spiritual practices. Corporations that saw traditional ecological knowledge as a source of profitable patents. If Marcus chose to become a keeper of sacred knowledge, he would be accepting a lifetime of hidden warfare against those who would exploit it. The vision shifted again, and Marcus found himself facing three figures who seemed to represent different aspects of his own nature. The first looked like his academic self, clean, rational, safe, and ultimately limited in what it could achieve. The second looked like a corrupted version of himself, wealthy and famous but hollow inside, having betrayed the trust of the people who had saved his life. The third was almost unrecognizable, scarred and weathered, but radiating a kind of power that the other two versions completely lacked. "Choose," all three figures said in unison. "But choose knowing that each path closes off the others forever." Marcus understood that this was the real test. Not whether Elena could trust him, but whether he could trust himself to become someone completely different from who he had always been. The academic self spoke first. "Return to your university. Write about your experience in general terms, focusing on the cultural significance without revealing specific details. You'll have a good career, publish respected papers, and live comfortably. You'll always wonder what you missed, but you'll be safe." The corrupted self laughed. "Don't listen to him. Think about what you could accomplish with real magical knowledge. You could become the most famous anthropologist in history. You could write best-selling books, star in television documentaries, become wealthy beyond your dreams. So what if you have to break a few promises to some old women in the desert?" The transformed self didn't speak immediately. When it finally did, its voice carried harmonics that seemed to resonate in Marcus's bones. "Neither fame nor safety matter if the world dies from the ignorance of those who have forgotten how to live in harmony with the earth. Choose to serve something larger than yourself. Choose to become a guardian of knowledge that could help heal the damage our species has done. Choose to become more than human." As the figures faded, Marcus found himself back in the Vision Library with Elena. But now he could see that the books weren't just repositories of information, they were alive, pulsing with the accumulated wisdom of countless generations of people who had learned to see beyond the surface of reality. "The knowledge I carry," Elena said, "includes techniques for accelerating plant growth, for purifying water using nothing but focused intention, for healing injuries that conventional medicine considers permanent. But it also includes more dangerous information: how to influence weather patterns, how to disrupt the electrical systems that modern civilization depends on, how to cause earthquakes or stop them. Marcus felt a chill of fear. "Why are you telling me this?" Elena's expression was grave. "Because if you choose to become a keeper, you will eventually learn all of it. The spirits do not allow partial knowledge. Either you commit completely to the path of guardianship, or you walk away and forget everything you have seen." The vision library began to fade, and Marcus found himself approaching the final test. He was standing in the middle of a vast circle of ancestors, thousands of Apache people who had lived and died to preserve the knowledge that Elena now carried. In the center of the circle was a fire that burned without fuel, its flames forming constantly shifting patterns that seemed to tell stories without words. Elena gestured for Marcus to approach the fire. "Place your hands in the flames," she instructed. "If your intentions are pure, if you are truly committed to serving as a guardian rather than an exploiter, the fire will not burn you. If there is any deception in your heart, any selfish motivation you have hidden even from yourself, you will be scarred permanently as a warning to others." Marcus looked at the fire, then at the thousands of ancestral figures watching him. He could feel their eyes weighing his soul, seeing every choice he had ever made, every moment of cowardice or courage that had brought him to this point. He thought about his comfortable life in Boston, his position at the university, the respect of his colleagues. All of that would have to be given up if he committed to this path. He would have to learn to live simply, to put service before personal gain, to risk his life protecting knowledge that most of the world would consider primitive superstition. But he also thought about what he had seen in the visions, the possibility of helping to heal some of the damage that his civilization had done to indigenous peoples and to the earth itself. The chance to serve something larger than his own career ambitions. The opportunity to become part of a tradition of guardianship that went back thousands of years. Marcus stepped forward and placed his hands directly into the flames. The fire was hot beyond anything he had ever experienced, but it did not burn him. Instead, it seemed to flow through his hands and up his arms, carrying information directly into his nervous system. He could feel the fire reading his intentions, searching through every aspect of his consciousness for any trace of deception or selfish motivation. For a moment, the flames flared higher, and Marcus felt searing pain as the fire encountered his ego, his academic pride, his unconscious sense of superiority over the people he studied. But, instead of burning him, the fire seemed to burn away those aspects of his personality, leaving something cleaner and stronger in their place. When the flames finally died down, Marcus found himself back in the physical chamber with Elena, Maria, and Sophia. But he was no longer the same person who had drunk the vision potion hours earlier. He could feel knowledge flowing into his mind, not just information, but actual skills and abilities that had been passed down through generations of Apache guardians. Elena nodded with satisfaction. "You have passed the test. The spirits have accepted you as a true guardian. But now the real work begins." Sophia, who had been tending a small fire during the entire vision sequence, came forward with a bowl of water and some kind of salve. "The markings will appear over the next few days," she explained, beginning to apply the salve to Marcus's hands and arms. Marcus looked down to see that his skin was indeed marked, but not with burns. Instead, intricate patterns were beginning to emerge, similar to the ones he had seen on Elena's face but unique to him. As he watched, the markings seemed to pulse with their own light. Maria explained, "The markings show that you have been accepted by the spirits. They will help you channel the Earth's energy and will mark you as a guardian to others who know how to read the signs." Elena was packing her ceremonial robes, but her expression was troubled. "We must leave this place quickly. During your vision, I sensed other presences in the desert. People who should not be here." Marcus was still trying to process the transformation he had undergone. "What kind of people?" Sophia answered as she finished treating his hands. "The kind who have been hunting for places like this for decades. Government agents, treasure hunters, people who work for private collectors willing to pay millions for authentic sacred objects." Elena shouldered her pack and gestured toward a passage Marcus hadn't noticed before. "There are those who have been watching my family for years, waiting for us to lead them to sites like this. Your helicopter rescue attempt may have drawn their attention." As they prepared to leave the chamber, Marcus felt a profound sadness at departing from the place where he had been reborn. But he also felt a new sense of purpose that was stronger than anything he had experienced in his previous life. The knowledge flowing through his mind was vast and complex, but he understood that he would spend years learning to use it properly. He could sense water sources miles away, feel the electrical patterns of approaching storms, and perceive the life force that flowed through every living thing around him. But, most importantly, he now understood his role as a guardian. It wasn't just about preserving information, it was about protecting a way of seeing the world that could help humanity find a sustainable path forward. As they entered the hidden passage that would lead them away from the vision chamber, Marcus heard the distant sound of helicopters again. But these weren't search and rescue aircraft. The sound was different, multiple military-style helicopters approaching their location with obvious hostile intent. Elena's expression grew grim. They found us. The real test begins now. The sound of helicopters grew louder as Elena led them through a maze of passages that seemed to have been carved by water over thousands of years. Marcus could feel his newly awakened senses picking up details he never would have noticed before: the vibrations of the aircraft engines transmitted through the rock, the electromagnetic signatures of electronic equipment, even the emotional states of the people searching for them. Sophia was struggling to keep up despite the improvement in her injured foot, and Maria had taken her sister's pack to lighten her load. Elena moved through the passages with the confidence of someone who had memorized every stone, but Marcus could see the tension in her shoulders. "How many of them are there?" Marcus whispered as they paused in a wider section of the passage. Elena closed her eyes and placed her hand against the rock wall. The markings on her face began to glow faintly as she extended her senses through the stone. 3 helicopters. At least 15 people, heavily armed. They have electronic equipment that can detect heat signatures and ground-penetrating radar. Maria looked frightened. "Grandmother, they have found the vision chamber. I can hear them talking on their radios." Elena nodded grimly. "They were waiting for us to reveal its location. Someone has been tracking our family for months, waiting for the right moment." As they continued through the passage system, Marcus began to understand the full scope of what they were facing. The people hunting them weren't just treasure hunters or curious researchers. They were part of a sophisticated operation that had been designed specifically to capture Elena and extract the knowledge she carried. They emerged from the passages onto a ledge that overlooked the main canyon. In the distance, Marcus could see armed figures rappelling from helicopters and setting up what looked like a military-style perimeter. Other teams were heading toward the cave entrances with electronic equipment that would soon detect their presence. Elena studied the situation for a long moment, then turned to Marcus with an expression he couldn't read. "The time has come for you to prove that you understand what it means to be a guardian." Marcus felt a chill of premonition. "What do you mean?" Sophia answered for her grandmother. "The knowledge Elena carries cannot be allowed to fall into the wrong hands. If they capture her alive, they will use drugs and torture to extract everything she knows. The sacred information would be weaponized and used to cause terrible harm." Maria added quietly, "There is a way to prevent this, but it requires a guardian to make a sacrifice that cannot be undone." Elena nodded toward the markings that were still developing on Marcus's hands and arms. "The spirits have given you the ability to channel enormous amounts of the Earth's energy. If you are willing to give your life to protect the knowledge, you can create a burst of electromagnetic energy that will destroy all their electronic equipment and disrupt their communications for hours." Marcus felt his heart racing. "But that would kill me?" Elena's expression was compassionate but firm. "Yes. The human body cannot channel that much energy and survive. But your sacrifice would give us time to escape and would prevent the knowledge from being captured. You would become part of the eternal guardianship, your spirit joining with those who have made similar sacrifices throughout our history." Marcus looked down at the armed figures moving through the canyon below. He could see that they were systematically searching every possible hiding place, and their equipment was sophisticated enough that they would inevitably find the hidden passages. Sophia placed a hand on his shoulder. "There is another option. We could surrender and hope that they only want to study the knowledge rather than use it for harmful purposes. But, once that information is in government databases or corporate research facilities, there would be no way to control how it is used. Maria was watching the soldiers through a pair of binoculars that Elena had produced from her pack. They are setting charges at the cave entrances. They plan to seal us inside and force us to surrender. Elena sat down on a flat stone and began removing items from her pack, bundles of herbs, small clay vessels, and what looked like pieces of crystal or polished stone. If Marcus chooses to make the sacrifice, I will need a few minutes to prepare the focusing array that will help him channel the energy safely. Marcus felt overwhelmed by the magnitude of the choice before him. He had been transformed by the vision quest, but he was still essentially the same person who had stumbled into the desert only days before. The idea of deliberately giving his life to protect knowledge he was only beginning to understand seemed impossible. But, as he watched the armed figures below, Marcus began to feel something he had never experienced before, a direct connection to the thousands of generations of people who had protected this knowledge before him. Through the markings on his skin, he could sense their presence, their willingness to sacrifice everything to preserve wisdom that could help heal the world. Elena began arranging the stones and crystals in a complex pattern. There is something else you should know before you decide. The electromagnetic burst will not only destroy their equipment, it will also activate dormant abilities in indigenous people throughout this entire region. The suppression technology that has been used to weaken our connection to the Earth's energy will be temporarily disabled. Sophia explained further. For generations, certain government agencies have been using electromagnetic fields to disrupt the spiritual practices of native communities. Your sacrifice would free hundreds of our people to use their full abilities for the first time in decades. Marcus realized that his decision wouldn't just be about protecting Elena's knowledge, it would be about liberating an entire community of people who had been systematically oppressed not just politically and economically, but spiritually as well. The sound of explosions echoed through the canyon as the soldiers began sealing cave entrances. Maria reported that they had found the main passage to the vision chamber and were sending teams inside. Elena finished her preparations and looked up at Marcus. The choice must be made now. In a few minutes, they will have us completely surrounded. Marcus closed his eyes and felt the energy flowing through the stone patterns Elena had created. He could sense the enormous power that was available to him, enough to accomplish what Elena had described, but also enough to tear his body apart in the process. But he could also sense something else. The presence of his grandfather, who had died when Marcus was 12 years old. The old man had been a veteran of World War II, and he had often told Marcus stories about moments when soldiers had to choose between their own safety and the welfare of their comrades. Sometimes, his grandfather's voice seemed to whisper through the energy patterns, "The most important thing a person can do is die well." Marcus opened his eyes and looked at Elena, Maria, and Sophia. These three women had saved his life, shared their most precious secrets with him, and accepted him as family despite having every reason to distrust him. Now they needed him to protect them in the only way possible. But, as Marcus prepared to step into the center of Elena's focusing array, something unexpected happened. The sound of the helicopters changed, becoming deeper and more rhythmic. Elena looked up with surprise. "Those are not the same aircraft," she said with confusion. Maria raised the binoculars again and studied the sky. "Grandmother, there are new helicopters approaching from the south. They are flying in formation and they have different markings." Through his enhanced senses, Marcus could perceive the emotional signatures of the people in the approaching aircraft. Unlike the cold, predatory feelings he sensed from the soldiers below, these new arrivals radiated something that felt like protective determination. Elena stood and walked to the edge of the ledge, placing her hand against a hidden marking that Marcus now recognized as a communication symbol. The marking began to glow, and Elena spoke in rapid Apache while maintaining contact with the stone. After a few minutes, she turned back to the group with an expression of amazement. The approaching helicopters carry members of an intertribal alliance that has been working in secret for decades. They have been monitoring government activities against native communities and waiting for an opportunity to intervene. Sophia looked skeptical. "How could they possibly know we need help?" Elena smiled for the first time since the soldiers had appeared. "The marking I activated is part of a communication network that connects sacred sites across the entire Southwest. When you underwent the vision quest, Marcus, the spiritual energy released by your transformation sent a signal through the network. Guardians and allies throughout the region now know that something important is happening here. The new helicopters swept into the canyon in a coordinated attack formation. Marcus watched in amazement as Native American warriors repelled from the aircraft, armed with modern weapons but also carrying traditional items that seemed to glow with their own power. The government soldiers found themselves caught between the approaching intertribal forces and the canyon walls, with their communications disrupted by some kind of electromagnetic interference that the new arrivals had brought with them. Elena began packing her focusing array with urgent efficiency. We must reach the evacuation point while our allies have the soldiers distracted. As they hurried through passages that Elena seemed to know by heart, Marcus could hear the sounds of a battle unlike anything he had ever imagined. The traditional weapons carried by the intertribal warriors weren't just ceremonial, they were functional tools that channeled spiritual energy in ways that made them devastatingly effective against modern military equipment. They emerged from the passage system at a point where one of the intertribal helicopters was waiting. A tall man in military-style clothing but, with traditional face paint gestured for them to hurry aboard. Elena Crowfeather, the man called out in accented English. The Council of Guardians sends greetings and emergency extraction. As they climbed into the helicopter, Marcus realized that he had been introduced to something much larger than Elena's individual knowledge. There was an entire hidden network of native communities that had been preparing for decades to protect their sacred traditions from those who would exploit them. The helicopter lifted off just as government soldiers reached their position. As they flew away from the canyon, Marcus could see the full scope of the battle below. The intertribal forces had completely surrounded the government teams, using tactics that combined modern military training with traditional spiritual warfare. Elena sat beside Marcus as they flew toward safety. The network you are now part of includes guardians from over 50 different tribes, she explained. We have been working in secret to preserve and protect indigenous knowledge while also preparing to defend it when necessary. Sophia, who looked relieved to finally be safe, added, the electromagnetic suppression technology that has been used against our communities will be completely disabled after today's operation. Our people will regain abilities that have been dormant for generations. Marcus looked down at the markings on his hands, which were now fully developed and glowing softly in the dim light of the helicopter cabin. What happens now? Elena smiled. Now you begin your real training. The Vision Quest gave you access to the knowledge, but learning to use it safely and effectively will take years. You will study with guardians from many different tribes, learning techniques that have been preserved and developed in secret for centuries. Maria leaned forward from her seat across the cabin. You will also help us identify and protect other sacred sites that are threatened by exploitation. Your academic background and connections in the non-native world will be valuable in creating legal protections and public awareness. As the helicopter carried them away from the canyon where Marcus's old life had ended, he felt a profound sense of purpose that he had never experienced before. He was no longer just a scholar studying indigenous cultures from the outside, he was now part of the living tradition he had spent his career trying to understand. The pilot, who Marcus now realized was also marked with traditional tattoos that glowed softly, turned back to address Elena. Elder, the council wants to know if the extraction was successful. Did the candidate complete the full transformation? Elena placed her hand on Marcus's shoulder. The spirits have accepted him completely. He is ready to serve as a bridge between worlds. Marcus looked out the window at the desert landscape passing below and thought about his former life in Boston. He would have to resign from the university, give up his apartment, and learn to live in a completely different way. But he felt no regret about leaving that old life behind. Through his enhanced senses, he could perceive the network of energy that connected all the sacred sites across the Southwest. He could feel the presence of other guardians, both living and ancestral, who were part of the great work of preserving indigenous wisdom for future generations. The helicopter flew toward the setting sun, carrying Marcus toward a destiny he could never have imagined when he had first stumbled into the desert only a week before. Behind them, the canyon where he had been reborn was quiet again, protected by the ancient markings that would ensure it remained hidden from those who would exploit its secrets. As night fell over the desert, Elena began teaching Marcus his first practical lesson in using the abilities the spirits had given him. He placed his hands on a small crystal that she produced from her pack and felt his consciousness expand to encompass the entire aircraft and the landscape around them. For the first time in his life, Marcus felt truly connected to something larger than himself. He was no longer just an individual trying to understand the world, he was part of an ancient tradition of guardianship that would continue long after his own life had ended. The markings on his skin pulsed with gentle light as the helicopter carried them toward the next phase of his journey. Somewhere in the distance, he could sense other guardians waiting to welcome him into the hidden community that had accepted him as family. Marcus Thompson, former university professor, was gone forever. In his place was someone new, a guardian of ancient wisdom, a bridge between worlds, and a protector of knowledge that could help heal the wounds that modern civilization had inflicted on the earth and its people. The transformation was complete, and the real adventure was just beginning.